I didn't think my manager hated me. Not at first. He was one of those guys who smiled too much, joked too loudly, and called everyone buddy like we were all extras in a sitcom he was starring in. The kind of manager who slapped your shoulder in the hallway and said things like, couldn't do it without you, even though you knew he absolutely would take full credit the second you left the room. We worked in a mid-sized B2B software company, big enough to have a CFO and a corporate handbook, small enough that politics mattered more than policies. I was an account manager, not the loudest, not the flashiest, but I got things done. My name was on the contracts that actually paid the bills. I'd been there 5 years. I'd ridden out 1 merger, 2 rebrands, and 3 different strategic realignments that were basically excuses to fire people quietly. Through all of it, my numbers stayed clean. Clients renewed. Deals grew. When things were shaky, my accounts were the ones leadership mentioned on those awkward all-hands slides. That's important later. My manager, let's call him Kyle, joined about a year before everything blew up. He came from some fast-growth startup that crashed and burned, but he told the story like he'd escaped a burning building while carrying the CEO. He loved words like optics and positioning, and he used them even when we were talking about coffee. At first, we were fine. He didn't bother me, I didn't bother him. He liked meetings, I liked clients. It was a workable division of labor. The first red flag came in a performance review. On paper, I'd had my best quarter ever. I'd closed 2 major renewals, upsold a third, and pulled a struggling account back from the edge because I caught a billing error before they did. My commission statement looked like a typo. Kyle skimmed the numbers, nodded, and then spent 20 minutes talking about my energy in internal meetings. You're solid with clients, he said, leaning back like a TED Talk reject. No one's questioning that. But in the room with leadership, you're a little flat. You don't sell yourself. I thought I was here to sell the product, I answered. He laughed like I'd told a joke. Buddy, you're always selling yourself, even when you don't think you are. I left that meeting with a meets expectations rating and a vague note about visibility. My clients were happy, my team relied on my documentation, but apparently I didn't smile enough in front of the VP of sales. I should have paid more attention to that. Over the next few months, Kyle started using my work like a prop. In team meetings, he'd pull up my deals and say things like, "See what happens when you follow the playbook?" His playbook, obviously. I didn't remember him being on those calls when I was talking to CFO off the ledge about implementation fees. But sure, I'd hear him on the phone with leadership. Yeah, we've been really tightening up our enterprise deals. Our. Never, Grant pulled that one out of the fire. Always, we adjusted our strategy. It was annoying, but not fatal. I told myself it was normal. Managers take credit, employees get quietly paid. That's just business. Then the company announced a restructuring. They didn't call it that, of course. They never do at first. It started with emails about macroeconomic headwinds and refocusing on core profitability. Then budget freezes. Then hiring pauses. Then the quiet rumors in the kitchen about which teams had been in long meetings with HR. My clients kept buying. I kept renewing. My pipeline looked good, especially compared to some of the newer reps who liked to post motivational quotes on Slack and not much else. I wasn't worried. I should have been. The day it happened, Kyle messaged me, "Got a sec? Pop into my office." His tone was casual, but the calendar notification came with a subject line, compensation adjustment. That phrase does something strange to your stomach when you see it next to your name. His office was fake comfortable, a plant that was clearly dying, a window that looked directly at a wall, and a shelf of leadership books he definitely hadn't read. He motioned for me to sit, closed the door, and pulled up a folder on his laptop. "So," he started, "you know we've been making some company-wide changes?" "Yeah," I said. "I've seen the emails." "Right." He rotated the screen slightly like I needed to witness my own execution from the perfect angle. The short version is, leadership had to make some tough calls on salaries across the org. We looked at market data, internal benchmarks, all that good stuff. He slid a printed paper across the desk toward me, face up, no drama, just numbers. My base salary, cut almost exactly in half. For a second, my brain refused to process it. I honestly thought it was a rough draft. Like maybe the inkjet skipped a digit. I read it 3 times. "This is a joke?" I finally asked. He shook his head slowly, wearing the sympathetic expression of someone who just deleted your save file. "I wish it were. It's a company-wide adjustment." "Company-wide?" I repeated. "Everyone in our team is getting a 50% cut?" He hesitated, just for a blink. "Percentages vary," he said, "but you're not the only one making sacrifices." I sat back in the chair. "Kyle, I closed 5 of the top 10 deals this quarter. You know that. And we appreciate it," he said quickly. "You're one of our strongest performers. But the reality is, comp structures were a little inflated. We're aligning you to market. You'll make it back in commission." "You mean commission that's calculated on deals I've already brought in?" I asked. "Because last I checked, those aren't inflated. They're paid." He gave me that corporate shrug, the one that says, "I've already made my decision and I'm pretending this is out of my hands." "Look," he said, "I need you to be a team player on this. If you ride this out, you'll be in a great position when things stabilize. We're trimming the fat so we can keep the real talent." "And cutting my salary in half is how you show I'm real talent?" I asked. He didn't answer that. He just tapped the signature line at the bottom of the page. "We'll need this back by end of day. HR wants everything processed by Friday." That's when something in me shifted. I didn't flip the desk. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw around threats about lawyers or knowing my worth. I just looked at him. Really looked. And it hit me. He thought I had no options. He thought my value started and ended with what he chose to see. He thought all the leverage was on his side of the desk. "Okay," I said finally. "I hear you." His shoulders dropped a little in relief. "I knew you'd get it. You're one of the reasonable ones." I picked up the paper, folded it once, slid it into my notebook. "I'll review this," I told him, standing up. "I'll get it back to you." He smiled like we'd just agreed on pizza toppings. "Love it. Appreciate you, buddy." I walked out of his office, past the open desks and the sales floor chatter, and straight to my corner where my client files lived. I didn't log into Slack. I didn't answer the emails piling up. Instead, I opened our CRM and ran one simple report. Every active deal, renewal, and upsell I'd touched in the last 18 months. The list was longer than I expected. My name was attached to almost every high-value account in our region, sometimes as primary owner, sometimes as assist, sometimes buried in the notes where I'd cleaned up someone else's mess. I printed the report. Then I started pulling contracts. Not company secrets. Not anything shady. Just the documents I'd personally negotiated. The emails I'd personally sent. The notes I'd personally written. Everything with my name attached. As the printer spat out page after page, I realized something that made me a lot calmer than a 50% pay cut should have allowed. If they wanted to treat me like I was disposable, fine. But I wasn't going to pretend we were all equally replaceable. Some people shake hands in pictures. Other people keep the lights on. Kyle thought these were just deals the team closed. The CFO didn't see the team. She saw revenue lines, owners, risk, dependency, and my name was on all of it. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet walk to the printer was the moment everything changed. For him, not for me. I didn't sleep much the night after Kyle handed me the pay cut paperwork. Not because I was panicking. Panic happens when something catches you off guard. This didn't. It was the confirmation of a pattern I'd ignored for too long. Kyle didn't want high performers. He wanted loyal decorations. People who clapped at his jokes and made him look like a leader in meetings. The kind who liked being led. I wasn't that guy. By morning, I'd printed almost 70 pages of contracts, emails, and CRM logs. My notebook was full, not of dirt, but of simple facts. Facts that mattered to people above Kyle's level. Facts the CFO cared about. Still, I walked into the office at 8:59 like it was any other day. The sales floor buzzed with the usual startup optimism. Too many monitors, not enough structure. Kyle was already at his desk, typing with the urgency of someone pretending to be busy. He didn't look up when I passed him. He thought he'd won. Around 9:20, he finally called out, "Grant, quick sync?" I stopped in the doorway. "I sent you the updated contract," he said, swiveling to face me. "Did you get a chance to sign?" "No," I replied. His smile tightened. "Everything good? Any questions?" "No questions," I said evenly. "I'll sign when I'm ready." "Right," he said, nodding a little too fast. "Totally, just don't want HR to chase us." He laughed. I didn't. Something in my silence made him shift in his chair. He expected anger. Anger is easy to dismiss. Calm unnerved him. Before he could speak again, my phone buzzed on the desk. A calendar invite from the VP of Sales. Weekly revenue review, mandatory. Kyle looked at the notification. He was CC'd, and his face twitched. That meeting wasn't usually mandatory for managers unless numbers were bad. He cleared his throat. "We should align beforehand." "Sure," I said. "Let me know when." I could feel him watching me as I walked back to my desk. He wasn't nervous yet, but he felt something shift. Around noon, one of our newer reps, Andrew, pulled up a chair next to my desk. "You hear the rumors?" he whispered. "Which ones?" I asked. "Cuts," he said. "Not salary cuts, actual cuts. Whole teams. People saying the CFO put her foot down after the last quarter." That got my attention. The CFO wasn't emotional. She wasn't political. She was the only executive who actually read the CRM logs instead of the slide decks. "What else?" I asked him. "Just whispers," Andrew said. But apparently she asked finance to pull deal attribution data from the last year. I felt the smallest flash of electricity up my spine. Deal attribution data. In our company, that meant one thing. Who actually did the work? Not who presented the slides, not who smiled on Zoom calls, not who hovered behind reps during demos pretending to be running the show. Who owned the revenue? And for our region, that was me. Repeatedly, consistently, quietly. Kyle must have heard us talking because he popped up from his desk like he'd been shot out of a toaster. "Team meeting in 10, he said loudly. "All hands." He only did all hands when he felt power slipping. We gathered in the conference room, glass walls, fake succulent in the middle, stale coffee smell. Kyle paced at the front, like a man trying on confidence in the mirror. "So," he began, "leadership is taking a closer look at performance metrics. Nothing bad, just normal stuff. We need to be aligned as a team." That was code for, I'm terrified someone above me is going to realize I'm taking more credit than I should. He clicked to a slide full of charts that meant nothing. "We're all under pressure," he continued. "We need to pull together. No room for ego." Andrew shot me a glance. He wasn't subtle. Kyle kept going, his voice warming up. "If anyone has questions about recent changes, compensation, targets, whatever, come to me. I'm your advocate." Advocate. He'd cut my salary in half and called it teamwork. The meeting ended with forced applause. As we dispersed, he pulled me aside by the elbow. "You good?" he asked, voice low. "I'm fine," I said. "You know you can talk to me." "I know," he swallowed. "You'll sign the adjustment?" I let a slow breath sit in my chest. "I'm reviewing everything first." That word, everything, landed. His pupils tightened. That afternoon, I had 3 client calls. All smooth, all professional. All recorded in the CRM with detailed notes. Every interaction added to a paper trail he couldn't rewrite. Near the end of the day, I stopped by the analytics desk, a small team that handled internal reporting. I knew the director, Monica, from a cross-department project 2 years earlier. "Hey," I said, "got a minute?" "For you?" "Always," she said. "What's up?" "Have you seen any unusual data requests from finance? Attribution reports? Deal audits?" Her eyebrows lifted just slightly. She wasn't surprised by the question. "Why do you ask?" she said. I shook my head, just trying to understand the landscape. She lowered her voice. "Off the record, the CFO's team pulled 12 months of deal audit logs, and they asked specifically for reports grouped by individual contributors. Not managers," I asked. "No," she said. "They actually told us to exclude managerial credit, where contribution wasn't documented." That was huge. A knife slid under the surface, right where Kyle hid. "And timeline?" I asked. "They're reviewing tomorrow morning." I nodded. "Thanks, Monica." As I turned to leave, she added, "You're going to be fine. Some people, less so." She didn't have to name him. Back at my desk, I checked the printouts again. Contracts, emails, notes. Clear, factual contribution. No spin, no interpretation, just receipts. When I looked up, Kyle was standing across the room, watching me, not openly, not aggressively, nervously. He gave me a thumbs up he didn't mean. I didn't return it. At 4:58 p.m., he messaged me on Slack. "Kyle, quick chat before you head out." I walked into his office. He closed the door fast, like someone trying to trap smoke. "Grant," he began, "I feel like we got off on the wrong foot yesterday." "We didn't," I said. He blinked. "I just don't want you to think I don't value you." "You cut my salary by half." His jaw clenched. "I didn't want to. But hard decisions—" "You made a choice," I said evenly. His face reddened. "I've gone to bat for you more than you know," he insisted. "If you sign the adjustment now, I can make sure you're protected if leadership asks questions." There it was. Not teamwork. Protection. Because he knew what they were reviewing tomorrow morning, I stood. "I'll get you the paperwork," I said. His relief was immediate. Too immediate. Kyle smiled. Real smile. Not performance. He thought he'd won again. I walked out of his office without another word. What I didn't tell him was simple. I wasn't signing. I wasn't arguing. And I wasn't saving him from the meeting he'd been dreading. Let the numbers talk. I'd carried the revenue. He'd carried the credit. Tomorrow, the CFO would see the difference. The next morning, the office felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just tighter. Like everyone had collectively inhaled and forgotten how to breathe out. Even the espresso machine hissed softer. I came in at 8:45. Kyle was already there, but not in his usual performative way. No loud "mornin' team," no forced jokes. He sat stiffly at his desk, clicking between tabs like he was being graded for speed. He didn't look at me when I passed. That was new. Kyle always looked. At 9:02, the VP of Sales sent a message to the whole department. Leadership revenue sync. All managers and key ICs. 9:30 sharp. Key ICs. Individual contributors. That phrasing didn't exist last month. Someone changed the language on purpose. I closed my laptop and took a slow breath. This was the moment where, in another life, I might have gotten anxious. But something in me had shifted last night while I was sorting through contracts, looking at months of my own work laid out in black ink. It hit me. I had done everything right. I had carried more than my share. I wasn't the weak link here. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that truth settle in my bones instead of in the back of my mind, where doubt usually lives. At 9:27, Kyle appeared at my desk. "You ready?" he asked, forcing a chuckle. "Big meeting." "I'm ready," I said. He waited for something, maybe reassurance, maybe panic. I gave him nothing. The conference room was cold enough to keep meat fresh. 12 seats, a long glass wall, a monitor already glowing with charts. The CFO was there. That mattered. She wasn't a figurehead. She didn't do small talk. She didn't pretend to listen. She was the one executive people didn't exaggerate stories about, because the truth was already intimidating. She nodded to me when I walked in. Not a smile. A nod. Acknowledgement. Kyle nearly tripped over himself pulling out a chair for her, which she didn't use. She sat at the head of the table, hands folded neatly. The VP cleared his throat. "Let's get started." The CFO clicked to the first slide. Deal contribution. 12-month audit. A list of names appeared: reps, specialists, support staff, and next to each name, a bar representing total attributed revenue. My bar stretched nearly across the entire screen. Kyle's bar, a thin line, barely more than interns who'd joined last quarter. The air shifted so fast it felt like pressure change in a plane cabin. Kyle leaned forward. Just want to clarify that those numbers don't reflect. They reflect exactly what happened, the CFO interrupted. No emotion, no inflection, just final. She clicked again. Contract ownership versus managerial credit requests. 2 columns, 2 colors. My name flooded the left column. Primary owner, co-owner, escalation lead, technical liaison, dozens of entries. The right column, credit requests for bonus approval, showed something different. Kyle's name, over and over, on deals he wasn't attached to, on accounts he never touched, on contracts where the notes literally said, "Resolved by Grant." A quiet murmur went around the table. Kyle tried again. There must be a misunderstanding. As team lead, some credit naturally follows contribution, the CFO said, and contribution follows documentation. Yours is absent. That was the first crack. Kyle's jaw tightened, but he tried to recover. I can explain some of those. I don't need explanations, she said. I need accuracy. She switched slides. Compensation adjustments. Proposed and submitted. My eyes locked on the numbers. There it was. A single line item with my name. Salary reduced by 48%. Submitted by K. Harrison Justification. Performance alignment. Low internal visibility. Low internal visibility. A phrase carefully chosen. A phrase meant to sound objective while describing nothing. The CFO tapped her pen once against the table. Mr. Harrison, she said, help me understand how your highest performing IC, whose accounts represent 38% of regional revenue, was selected for the steepest compensation reduction. Kyle's mouth opened. No sound came out, just air. I felt something then, not triumph, not gloating, something quieter, a release. I had carried that man's department for a year. He repaid me by trying to bury me, and now the numbers were showing the truth on a 50-inch screen. He finally stumbled out a sentence. Grant is very capable, but he struggles with, presence, internally. Internally? The CFO repeated. Yes, Kyle said. He's great with clients, obviously, but internally, he doesn't always project leadership. The CFO's eyebrow lifted, barely. So your criteria for salary protection, she said, prioritized internal performance over revenue generation. It's about balance, Kyle insisted. Culture matters. Culture doesn't pay invoices, she added. Silence. Hard silence. Then the VP spoke carefully. Kyle, I reviewed your year-end evaluations. Not once did you flag performance issues for Grant. Kyle blinked. Twice. The CFO tapped the screen. Yet you submitted this reduction alone. The VP added, and submitted bonus requests for multiple deals, where your contribution wasn't documented. That's serious. Kyle's throat bobbed. I think we're making a bigger deal out of this than... We are making exactly as big a deal as the numbers dictate, the CFO said. She clicked to the final slide. Actions required, prior to final review. The room leaned forward. Item 1. Audit of managerial credit claims. Immediate. Item 2. Freeze on all compensation changes pending review. Item 3. Mandatory correction of misattributed deals. Item 4. Reevaluation of regional leadership structure. Kyle read line 4 3 times. His face drained slowly, like someone pulling a plug. That was the moment he understood. Not that he might get reprimanded, not that he'd be investigated, that he was no longer safe. The CFO looked directly at him. Kyle, please stay after the meeting. He swallowed hard. Of course. She turned to me. Grant, your presence is also requested. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with clarity. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was a pivot. I'd expected numbers to speak. I hadn't expected them to speak this loudly. The meeting wrapped. Chairs shifted. Everyone filed out quietly, eyes averted. Not from me, but from Kyle. No one wanted to witness the fall directly. As I turned to sit back down, the CFO said, "Before we begin, I need both of you to understand something." We looked up. "This conversation is not about punishment," she said. "It's about accuracy, attribution, and integrity." Kyle nodded rapidly, desperate. I just listened. Then she added, "And before we address next steps, I have one question for each of you." She looked at Kyle. "Why did you cut his salary?" Then she looked at me. "And what did you plan to do about it?" I opened my mouth, and that was the moment everything truly broke open. The room felt smaller once the door clicked shut. Just me, Kyle, and the CFO. 3 people, but the air carried the weight of an entire department. She folded her hands on the table. "Let's start with the first question," she said, eyes fixed on Kyle. "Why did you cut his salary?" Kyle wasn't a stupid man. Arrogant, yes. Performative, definitely, but not stupid. Still, everything that made him dangerous was gone now. His posture, usually wide and self-assured, had collapsed inward. His hands twitched on the table as he tried to gather the words. He took a breath. The company needed adjustments. Leadership asked us to trim costs. I made the decisions I thought were best for the team. "Based on what criteria?" the CFO asked. Well, multiple factors," he said quickly. "Internal communication, leadership potential, adaptability. It's not just about revenue." She didn't blink. "Revenue pays for everything else." His throat tightened. "I was trying to balance the team, create consistency. By cutting the salary of the one person whose work actually created consistency, the one whose accounts prevent churn, the one whose renewals kept you above the red line in Q1 and Q2? I didn't look at him. I didn't have to. He flinched like each sentence was a pebble dropped into a deep well he didn't want to see the bottom of. The CFO shifted her attention. "Grant," she said, "your response?" I met her gaze. I didn't plan anything dramatic. I gathered documentation of my work, deals I handled, contracts I closed, escalations I resolved. I wasn't planning to take it anywhere unless I needed to. "All factual," she clarified. "No amplification?" "None," I said. She nodded once, approving. "Documentation is not weaponization. It is clarity." Kyle's eyes darted between us. I wasn't trying to punish him. I was trying to build a team that doesn't rely on one person. The CFO leaned slightly forward. "Then your job was to resource properly, train properly, lead properly, not diminish your only consistently performing IC." He opened his mouth again, but she lifted a hand. Small gesture, enormous power. "You took credit on deals you didn't touch," she said. "You filed a compensation reduction without cause. And you did it while depending on the person you undermined." Kyle's jaw twitched. "Look, I made mistakes. Oversights. I can fix it. I can handle—" "No," she said, "you can't." That was the first time his face genuinely fell, like the ground itself had moved under him. The CFO pulled up a final tab. It wasn't a slide. It was an HR review form pre-filled with bullet points. "Based on our audit," she said calmly, "we've identified multiple inconsistencies requiring corrective action." She turned the screen slightly, not to me, but directly to him. "Misattributed credit on 19 deals, performance review discrepancies, unauthorized compensation alteration, pattern of inconsistent managerial documentation, questionable justification language, potential conflict of interest in bonus submissions." Kyle stared at the list like it was written in another language. He swallowed and forced a shaky laugh. "So what? I'm getting written up? We can talk this through." "No," she said. "This is not a performance improvement situation. This is a structural integrity issue." Structural integrity. The kind of phrase that ends careers. He sat back, spine bending like a hinge. "For the sake of transparency," she continued, "I've scheduled a meeting with HR and the VP of Sales this afternoon." He blinked hard. Do I need representation? That's up to you, she said plainly. Silence. A long one. Then she turned to me. As for you, Grant, I have questions. I straightened. Of course. You consistently closed enterprise-level accounts without escalation to your manager, she said. Is that because he wasn't involved or because you intentionally excluded him? I didn't have to exclude him, I replied. He didn't attend calls, he didn't join demos. If I pinged him with an update, he'd reply with thumbs-up emojis. Clients needed answers, so I handled them. Did he ever block your access to resources? No, I said. He didn't block anything. He just wasn't present. And training of new reps? Who handled that? I hesitated only long enough to keep it factual. I did the product onboarding. I created the templates we use. I reviewed the proposals before sending them out. She nodded again. Your documentation and Monica's analytics confirm that. Kyle finally snapped. You're making me out to be incompetent. I wasn't absent. I was managing. You were managing optics, she said bluntly, not outcomes. The words hit harder than a shout. He pushed his chair back slightly. I built this team. You built a stage, she corrected, and you stood on it using his work as the lights. Kyle looked at me then, really looked, not with superiority, not with false confidence, with recognition, the kind that comes right before collapse. You went around me, he said quietly. No, I replied. You went around the work. The CFO closed her laptop. Here's what's going to happen. She spoke in crisp, controlled sentences. 1. The compensation reduction is reversed immediately. 2. All misattributed deals will be reassigned to their rightful owner. 3. Pending bonuses will be recalculated. 4. HR will conduct a formal review of managerial conduct. 5. During that review, Kyle, you'll be placed on administrative leave. Administrative leave. In corporate language, that's the period between the storm forming and the lightning strike. Kyle's face turned gray. Administrative leave? For what? For what, exactly? For jeopardizing revenue while mismanaging your team, she said, and for actions that could be interpreted as retaliatory. He went still. Retaliatory was a dangerous word. The CFO stood, gathering her tablet. This conversation is concluded. She walked to the door. Before she opened it, she turned to me. Grant, she said, I'd like to speak with you privately in 10 minutes. We have decisions to make regarding team structure. Kyle's breath caught. He understood exactly what that meant. When she left, the room sank into a silence thick enough to chew through. Kyle slowly turned to me. No hard feelings, right? The words were fragile, desperate, hollow. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smirk. I didn't enjoy it. I just answered the truth. You cut my salary in half, I said, and thought I'd thank you for the opportunity. He looked away, eyes unfocused, like he'd finally realized the safety net wasn't under him anymore. And then he said the sentence I'll never forget. I didn't think you'd fight back. I stood. I didn't, I said. The numbers did. I walked out and left him sitting there, small, quiet, and finally facing the world he'd built on top of other people's work. His world had cracked. Mine had just opened. The CFO's assistant stopped by my desk 10 minutes later. Conference room B, she said quietly, as if delivering news that required a softer tone. I nodded, closed my laptop, and walked down the hall. It felt like I was walking toward something I hadn't let myself imagine, something I'd earned without ever once saying the words out loud. When I stepped into the room, the CFO was there, and so was the VP of Sales, and the HR director. 3 people who didn't attend the same meeting unless someone's world was about to shift. Have a seat, the CFO said. The VP spoke first. Grant, we've reviewed the attribution data again along with your documentation. We've also compared it against team performance and your role over the past year. He tapped a folder in front of him. You've been operating far above the expectations of your position. That's accurate, the CFO added, and the company hasn't been compensating you accordingly. HR folded her hands. We're here to correct that. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't react. This wasn't the time for relief. This was the time to listen. The VP continued. There are a few options. The simplest, move you to senior account executive. Significantly higher base salary, leadership track. The CFO shook her head slightly. Still too small. HR nodded. Agreed. The VP looked at her. You want to go bigger? I want to align responsibility with actual skill, the CFO replied, not with titles assigned for politics. She turned to me. Grant, based on your performance and contribution to enterprise accounts, we're offering you the newly restructured position of regional lead, enterprise accounts. I exhaled, slow, controlled, but inside something shifted, not shock, not disbelief, recognition. The CFO slid the folder toward me. It comes with full discretion over major accounts, she said, hiring authority for 2 new ICs, training oversight, and a comp structure that reflects the revenue you produce. The VP added, it's a step below director level, but functionally it's the role someone like Kyle should have grown into. And, HR added, it bypasses the current management tier entirely, meaning I wouldn't report to Kyle or anyone like him again, meaning I had earned a seat he'd never qualify for, even in theory. I nodded once. What about my team? You'll choose your own, the CFO said. Anyone who stays under you will stay because you want them there. And Kyle? I asked plainly. HR exchanged a glance with the VP. The CFO answered. For now he's on leave, she said. But based on the documentation and analytic findings, termination is likely. Factual, neutral, final. We'll be concluding his review this week, HR said. You won't need to be involved. I paused. Then I asked the one question I needed clarity on. And the salary cut he submitted? Reversed, the CFO said immediately. Retroactively. You'll receive the difference in your next payroll cycle. I leaned back. Not victorious, not smug, just done. Like a door had finally closed that I never wanted to see again. The VP clasped his hands. We want you here long-term, Grant. We want people who build, not people who pretend. I signed. Not because I needed validation, not because I needed revenge, because the work I'd done finally lined up with the seat I occupied. When I stepped out of the room, the office had that uncomfortable hum, the kind that spreads after bad news and gets passed person to person without anyone saying a word. Kyle's desk was empty, phone gone, laptop gone, badge missing from its slot. He must have been escorted out while I was in the meeting. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't anything dramatic. It was simply accurate. People looked at me as I walked past, some curious, some relieved, some shocked. Andrew mouthed, Is it true? I just nodded once. He whispered, Finally. At 3:15 p.m., the CFO sent an all-company email. Organizational update. Revenue and leadership alignment. Neutral language. No names. Just facts. Then came the second email, directly to me. Welcome to your new role. Let's build something cleaner than what you inherited. See. I sat at my desk and let out a slow breath, the first real breath in months. Over the next few weeks, things changed. Quietly, orderly. KL's departure went through HR channels. No spectacle, no gossip explosion, but the people who needed to know knew. I interviewed 5 candidates for my new team. Chose 2, both hungry, intelligent, grounded. No ego, no theatrics. No Kyle energy. Clients responded differently once they knew I had authority. They trusted faster, renewed quicker, signed larger deals without hesitation, because they finally saw what my coworkers already knew. I wasn't the loudest person in the room. I wasn't the flashiest. I didn't perform leadership. I did it. And it showed. The CFO checked in with me 3 weeks later. How's the team? She asked. Solid, I said. Learning fast. Good. I want you presenting at next quarter's revenue review. Kyle used to present those. Now the responsibility sat in my lap, and the weight felt right. She paused before stepping away. "One more thing," she said. "You handled this cleanly." I nodded. "I didn't want conflict." "You avoided retaliation, that matters." Then she added something I didn't expect. "People who don't need to burn bridges rarely cause fires." She left, and something in her words stayed with me. Not fire, not anger, not revenge, just accuracy, integrity, alignment. On a Friday afternoon, I stayed late finishing a proposal. The office was almost empty. I remembered that night months ago when Kyle slid the pay cut form across his desk and expected me to just sign away my dignity. And somehow, sitting there under the soft hum of ceiling lights, I felt something I didn't expect. Gratitude. Not for him, not for what he did, but for what it forced me to see. I had outgrown the place where small people thrived, outgrown the shadows where other people hid, outgrown the idea that doing the work quietly meant letting someone else rewrite the story. I shut my laptop, stood, and looked over the now quiet department. This time it wasn't someone else's stage. It wasn't someone else's spotlight. It wasn't someone else's narrative. It was mine, built by me, earned by me, carried by me, and finally, accurately, recognized. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk in holding a trophy or a punchline. Peace is walking out of the building you've rebuilt from the inside with your shoulders straight and your name finally written where it always belonged, next to the work that was always yours.